Hi everyone, thank you for joining me as we talk about increasing student engagement with Turnitin as a tool, not an obstacle. I'm Patricia Reilly, and I teach an art history course for the Division of General Education Department here at Ashford and for another college as well. My experience as an educator in the online environment has been ongoing for over 15 years. Additionally, I have worked most recently as an educational technologist primarily in upper school settings. It is from these experiences this presentation germinated as I help to implement the Turnitin platform with students and faculty as a tool to help them familiarize themselves with what similarity reports look like and a way to prepare students for what they will encounter when they enter their post-secondary experience. While my work with my undergraduate students in the area of similarity reports and Turnitin is more recent, the foundation I began as an educational technologist is making headway. In this presentation, we will look at how students view plagiarism and ethical use of content. Understand how Turnitin can be utilized as a best practice teaching tool. And learn some strategies and think about developing our own to improve research and writing skills. At the outset, I think it is important for us to come to an understanding of what a similarity report is and what it is not, and I hope that you will do the same with your students in the future. As you can see, Turnitin's definition makes the same points for students as it does for instructors. Similarity reports are a summary of matching content, cannot determine plagiarism, and it is a tool. The one major difference I found, only instructors can deem what is a good or bad score, as interpretation of the can only be made by the instructor. In this example, we see two percentages and color coding. While the 16% may not set off an alarm, what if it were one block of text that was not referenced? That said, we look at the 32% and we might sense some red flags going up. Now, of course, we have to take into consideration the type of writing assignment it is and understand that the similarity report does not always accurately account for the words used. That is why I always advocate for clarity with our students, because there can be mixed messaging when one instructor picks a percentage point and another does not. My hope is that as we move through the presentation, you will gain an understanding of why I feel it is important to engage Turnitin as a tool and communicate with your students how it is going to be used for various assignments. Inherently, students understand that paper mills are equated to plagiarism, but there are fuzzy lines from there. And I would argue that students, especially those new to higher education as adult learners, operate under ignorance is bliss. I have noticed in my teaching experience that secondary students are far more interested in understanding the topic, whereas I have not found the same interest with my undergraduates. The online student presents a particular challenge. It is difficult to gauge even those who engage the topic, whether they have been reached. Whereas when modeling use of Turnitin with face-to-face students, a path of understanding on what is and what is not plagiarism can happen more readily. And I would add that as instructors, we need to engage in deeper formative feedback that directly and accurately address the numerous ways students plagiarize in their writing. That could be a topic in itself for the Teaching and Learning Conference, but I want to continue with how we can use Turnitin as one tool to assist in the process. Within a 5-week course, it can be difficult to take our students through the writing process. We need to establish a coaching role rather than an adversarial one. And I feel this can take on many forms as we reinforce source attribution that takes place, along with stressing the revision process. One way I do this is to allow my students to turn in a rough draft, and I look at it after they consider what was noted in the Similarity report. Another institution where I am an adjunct with a similar class, we have a 5-part paper, and I encourage all students to turn in a rough draft for each section. I provide deadlines for the process. I do need to note that not all students take me up on reviewing all 5 sections, but I find that students who turn in at least 2 sections tend to demonstrate a better understanding of how to read a Similarity report. I also feel compelled to add that as teachers and an institution, we need to ensure that we structure our assignments so they don't encourage plagiarism, but rather papers that encourage discovery of topics. This will assist our students in gaining an understanding of the writing process as a rigorous endeavor of inquiry and learning. This image, sourced from Turnitin, illustrates the top 10 examples of plagiarism we find in our students' work. I would argue that we need to look to number 3 as a focus and work with our students on how to paraphrase their work. Clear examples from the student's own writing are most effective. Another area that we don't often consider are the cultural differences of our students and that they are not familiar with citing sources and do not find problems with copying others' works. I will give you a moment to look over the slide. I advocate the creation of a safe space for students to turn in work prior to their submission for the class. This was extremely successful on the secondary level. Students need to be able to check their work without concern that a teacher will see it prior to the submission, even for a rough draft if necessary. For my classes, I have been posting announcements and emails and have encouraged students to submit their work prior dates to include discussions and journal entries. My hope is that this will start to have an impact as students are aware that I will not look if they don't want me to, or they can take screenshots and ask for assistance. One positive result is that my current class has referenced all their work right from the start. A key to all of this is to provide handouts that have clear and detailed instructions. I use Jing and at times record my voice as I explain how to read the Similarity reports. Here's an example of the type of handout I create. It takes the students through the process of reading a Turnitin Similarity report. As I go through the report, I explain what each element of the report means. But first and most importantly, I try to de-emphasize what the total number percentage means. I do emphasize Turnitin's ability to hyperlink back to source. This can prove not only instructive to how to faithfully annotate another's work, it is also eye-opening. Most students do not anticipate this type of depth in the reporting. I am confident that what I am going to suggest is not new and takes place in others' courses, but I find it is a good refresher when working with new undergraduate students. I feel that online students need more frequent reminders because they get focused on completing their assignments and they often glaze over their communications with their instructors. First, I encourage students to record their resources as they go through the writing process and the course. My choice is a simple Excel or Google Sheets spreadsheet, and I stress that first and foremost, students need to at least copy the URLs they are using. There are also platforms such as Zotero, ReadCube, and EndNote to help with the research papers. Students do not appear to have an understanding of paraphrasing and the fine line between that and plagiarism. This is another area where Turnitin can be used as a tool to ensure that quotes appear with exact wording. And if their attempt to paraphrase is too close to the wording of the original content, helping the students see if they need to provide a summary, if applicable. Having students set goals and objectives in the writing process along with an outline can help students remain focused. As a condensed course, everything moves swiftly, and the writing assignment, at least in my class, does not always get the attention it should. While my experience with AU's curriculum in my art appreciation class is that we do a good job of developing meaningful learning activities, we need to, as an online university, provide solid guidance. But the informal nature of the online environment means barriers. I advocate for a webinar for students on Turnitin and plagiarism as part of their introduction to their classes. This will ensure that we reach all of our students and a common objective is heard across all members of the student body. As I developed this presentation, along with my own best practices with Turnitin, I constantly revised and relooked at what I'm doing with my students. There are two areas that I am presently focused on because I could not make them happen as stated in my conference proposal. First, how to engage students in an online session for Turnitin. When I presented the opportunity to my students in my previous class, no one asked to participate. Second, my desire was to set up a safe space Dropbox for my course. Could not be created with the way Ashford utilizes Turnitin with Waypoint. Neither one of these are insurmountable. I have had some students who will upload their assignments, whether they are journal entries or discussions. They cut and paste their work into a Word document and submit it. And while at first this felt like a temporary solution, it does reinforce the need to check work and self-edit prior to submission. However, I still am working through the Safe Space Dropbox and will continue to see if this can happen and would love some input from you. In preparing this section, there were only two words that resonated with me, and they were consistent and redo. And it can be summed up in a sentence. Consistent comments with room for students to redo without punitive measures. For me, that is using the Similarity report as the tool it is meant to be, not assigning an arbitrary percentage, but rather looking at percentage and ensuring the quotes are conveyed properly. Paraphrasing or summaries appear correctly. And an area we did not discuss, but I constantly run into, are students using other students' work without permission and not realizing that these appear in the Similarity reports too. The Turnitin website is a great resource on how Turnitin works and allows for easy copying of images for guide sheets. There are activities, trainings, and videos. And why not start with the YouTube Turnitin Academy? Other tools for success include examples of learning activities on the Turnitin website. They can be adapted to our online work with our students. Understanding plagiarism with some help from Dr. Zeus is just one example. Also, numerous universities have already created some wonderful and applicable guide sheets, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. In putting together this presentation, I have used some wonderful resources and I'm sharing them here with you. They include learning about what plagiarism is, the efficacy of plagiarism detection, how to avoid plagiarism, the false positives on plagiarism that you find in plagiarism detectors, best practices for avoiding plagiarism, plagiarism detection and finding that teachable moment, plagiarism in the online world with solutions to the problems that we encounter, and the effectiveness of Turnitin, along with the Turnitin Academy and more Turnitin resources. What constantly drives me is my dedication and philosophy that online learning makes access to education equitable. And I feel it is incumbent upon me to provide access to tools in a manner that will not only benefit my students now, but will have an impact on their future academic endeavors. Additionally, it is my background as an educational technologist that informs how I look at similarity reports. In my role as an educational technologist, I am constantly striving to impress upon academic institutions the need to follow digital citizenship. This includes crediting and citing sources properly. What we have to be mindful of as we develop our own best practices with the use of Turnitin is that we should model exactly what our expectations are for our students. Take the time to reference, cite, and attribute what we use has to take a priority. And I have realized from doing this, it makes me a better teacher and allows me to understand my students' perspective. Thank you, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or any suggestions on how you have used Turnitin and their similarity reports. I wish you the best success in all of your classes.